My name's Edward Daffarn. I'm a committee member at Grenfell United. So we sit here today, a few days after the Queen's speech, with an understanding that the White Paper on Social Housing isn't going to be included in the next tranche of government legislation, so that the things that Grenfell United have fought so hard for in terms of resident voice, a proper complaints process administered through the Housing Ombudsman, a proper regime of independent inspection of local authorities, TMOs, ALMOs, housing associations, and our call for a professionalisation inside the industry, so inside the housing sector, so that people who work inside the housing sector have proper qualifications, proper ethics and proper values and continuous professional development. We sit here knowing that for at least another year and a half, which is going to be 5.5 years after Grenfell, the government have chosen to not enact this legislation. And that feels like a betrayal, and it feels like they have not understood how important it is that a legacy is created for Grenfell and for the 72 people who lost their lives. It's not a failing of Grenfell United, it's not a failing of the community that the government haven't acted, it's a failing of the government. It's a failing of Robert Jenrick, it's a failing of Boris Johnson, and it's a failing of Eddie Hughes, Christopher Pincher, those ministers with responsibility to deliver change so that we are not remembered for what happened before Grenfell, but we are remembered as a community for the change that came after Grenfell. And those ministers are responsible for not taking that forward. A consequence of not taking that forward is that families, such as those living in Croydon, living in mould-infested, uninhabitable flats, do not get their legitimate complaints and concerns addressed. That residents who try to form residents' associations, who try to get their concerns heard collectively, are not listened to. That landlords, housing associations that continue to act like the KCTMO did, disrespecting their residents, not treating them with humanity, are able to carry on in that manner because there is no independent, robust inspection of their organisations. So 4 years after Grenfell, we're stuck with one piece of legislation, the Fire Safety Bill, that has really done very little to address the problems faced by leaseholders trapped in properties covered with ACM and other flammable cladding. On an almost daily basis at Grenfell United, we're contacted by people who live in social housing, which is approximately 1/5 of the country. And we know very well how many people are still suffering the same kind of treatment that we experience from the KCTMO, whether it is having their complaints ignored, whether it is having their voices not being listened to. And as long as there is no white paper on social housing, there will be no legacy for Grenfell. And we are determined at Grenfell United to fight until every tenant in social housing is treated with respect and humanity. It's not acceptable that residents who complain are then subject to having their tenancies examined by their landlord.
Did you ask Robert Black to make inquiries into Mr. Daffarn's tenancy background?
Yes, I did.
Why did you do that?
Because there was a number of people who attended their meeting, and I just wanted to understand whether they were leaseholders or tenants. And it also provided an opportunity, because we had another member who attended very regularly, a gentleman called Peter Martindale, who turns out was illegally subletting. So it gave an opportunity just to check, sort of who was coming along and what their status was.
It's not acceptable when residents make complaints regarding fire safety that they're called liars. It's not acceptable that social landlords can collude among their senior management team to try and negate the effects of fire risk assessments and try to water down the safety aspects contained inside them.
That there were 921 outstanding actions that needed to be completed.
Yeah.
So is this right, that in the period of 26 months some 40% remained outstanding, just as a matter of arithmetic.
It would appear so, yes.
State of the FRA issue, to the extent that you were worried about what the LFB might make of it.
I was very clear that there was an issue with fire risk assessment actions.
And that there was a concern that the LFB might find out, if they exercise more scrutiny, quite what the extent of outstanding FRA actions was, and put the TMO at risk of enforcement action.
I don't have recollection of that.
Start of your time at the TMO, there were issues with fire equipment at GT, Grenfell Tower, and actions arising from fire risk assessments.
Yes.
So those were areas of sensitivity.
Yes.
And you then insist on being able to check fire risk reports before they're sent out to residents and before auditors see them. Or as your thoughts were concerned, did it not occur to you that it was important for the residents of Grenfell Tower to know that one of the major active fire prevention mechanisms in the building wasn't working?
I think as I sit here now, again, hindsight is a great thing. It is something that we could have told people about, but we didn't.
Thanks, Claire. Let's hope our luck holds and there are no fires in the meantime. Did you think that hoping your luck holds and there are no fires in the meantime was a safe way of proceeding? Safe from the residents' point of view?
I don't know. I read it like that.
At the end of giving my evidence to the public inquiry, I was asked by Richard Millett if there was anything I would like to say. There was one thing that came to mind, and that was that it is absolutely vital that in considering the evidence put before the public inquiry, that they consider the culture of the KCTMO and how that culture was causative of the events of June the 14th, 2017, and how the lack of scrutiny by their landlord, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, allowed the KCTMO to act in that manner.
Is it right then that nobody, to your knowledge, nobody within RBKC oversaw health and safety within the TMO?
I don't believe they did, no.
Beyond the reports that you've discussed?
Yes.
Right. Right.
If that scrutiny had been in place, and if the KCTMO had not been able to act with the callousness and disregard towards their tenants that they had been, the whole of Grenfell could have been avoided.